Professor Mia Reilly was known for her sense of justice and her ability to unravel the most complex criminal cases. She had become a true mentor to her students, who felt they could genuinely trust her. One of her students, the modest and diligent Becky Pierce, often turned to Mia for support, especially regarding issues at the university. Becky was quiet and reserved, unlike her outgoing neighbor, Lindsay, who thrived on throwing loud parties in their shared dorm room, despite Becky's protests. Their relationship was often strained, but Becky consistently avoided conflict and kept her distance. One evening, the university was rocked by a chilling announcement. Lindsay had been found dead in one of the campus's abandoned corners. It was a place few dared to enter, an old archive now covered in dust and remnants of the long-forgotten history of the university. When the detectives arrived at the crime scene, they were met with a grim and ruthless sight. Lindsay's body lay on the cracked, stained floor. Her face was so disfigured that even her family would have difficulty recognizing her. It was frozen in terror, her skin taking on a sinister, pale hue, and her fingers twisted at unnatural angles, revealing the struggle she endured before her death. In her eyes lingered a silent question and unspeakable horror. Nearby lay a bracelet, ordinary but familiar to anyone who knew Becky. This became direct evidence for the police. Becky was quickly named a suspect, as their rivalry was well known, and everyone remembered the numerous arguments over the raucous parties. Mia refused to believe in Becky's guilt, sensing that something was amiss in this story. The police had jumped to their conclusion too quickly, seemingly ignoring other potential clues. It troubled Mia that every detail seemed deliberately aimed at pointing the finger at Becky. Law enforcement insisted on the obviousness of the crime to protect the university's reputation, but Mia saw things differently. Understanding she could jeopardize her career, but driven by a desire for the truth, she decided to conduct her own investigation. Digging deeper, she stumbled upon increasingly sinister details. Witnesses emerged, recalling that just before her death, Lindsay had received mysterious threats. Initially, they were postcards featuring creepy drawings, later turning into photographs of her taken at night while she slept. One day, an image of dark campus corridors appeared at her door, shadows creeping out from the darkness, as if someone was watching her. Lindsay dismissed it as a sick joke, but with each new message, they became more ominous. As Mia investigated, it became clear that Lindsay had been a victim of psychological terror long before her murder, and this might have been just the beginning of a terrifying game. Mia tried to cautiously question students and staff, and the deeper she delved into the details, the more she felt she herself was being stalked. One evening, as she returned to her office, she discovered a postcard resembling those Lindsay had received. It depicted her office with a darkened window and a barely visible figure standing by her desk. Startled, Mia glanced around, but the corridor was silent and empty. She felt as though someone was watching her, as if that sinister gaze never left her, even for a moment. The next day, she woke in the middle of the night to some noise, only to find her apartment door slightly ajar. With each passing day, danger grew more tangible, and finally, one late meeting in her office turned into something horrifying. Suddenly, the lights went out, and a shadow loomed closer outside the door. She felt cold fingers on her neck, and a muffled voice whispered, demanding that she stop her investigation. In a final moment of resolve, Mia summoned her strength to resist, but the shadow vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving scratches on the door of her office. Mia was deeply immersed in the case, feeling the pieces slowly coming together to form a horrifying picture where Lindsay seemed to be living a life far removed from the image of the queen of campus. The more Mia dug into Lindsay's past, the more she understood. The girl was involved in dark schemes that went beyond simple intrigue. Lindsay was part of an underground group that brought together students from various majors and backgrounds. They engaged in fraud, deceiving classmates and professors, manipulating information and exploiting the weaknesses of those who trusted them. By identifying vulnerable students, the group initially offered help and then cunningly and confidently used them for their own interests. Lindsay wasn't just a member. She was a leader who held sway over everyone, unhesitatingly leveraging her connections to get what she wanted. Mia found several messages on Lindsay's phone in which the girl threatened someone in the group, saying she would expose their true face if she didn't get her share. This pressure was especially dangerous for several influential students, including her ex-boyfriend, Nate. Nate was attractive and popular, but after their breakup, Lindsay seemed determined to ruin his reputation. She publicly humiliated him several times, accusing him of cheating, and further stoked the flames by spreading rumors about his ties to the dark dealings of the university. Another mysterious figure in this drama was her longtime friend Sasha, who initially idolized Lindsay but eventually realized she had become just another one of Lindsay's playthings. Sasha suspected that Lindsay had betrayed her, and this became the last straw in their friendship. With each new piece of information, Mia's anxiety grew. One day, returning home late after yet another visit with witnesses, she noticed a dark car following her, its headlights flashing repeatedly, making her look over her shoulder. Mia tried to calm herself, but fear enveloped her more and more. The car drew closer, and for a moment, she thought she saw the silhouette of a driver, a man in a hoodie, watching her intently. Suddenly, the headlights went out, and the car disappeared as if it had dissolved into the darkness. Shortly after this incident, Mia began receiving strange messages. She found notes under her office door that read, "Back off while you still can," or "You'll be next." Once, she even received a phone call in the middle of the night. The voice on the other end was muffled but filled with hatred. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. If you want to live, leave this case alone." Mia felt her breath catch, but at the same time, she realized that these threats only reinforced her suspicions. She no longer had any doubts that Becky was innocent, and the real killer was trying to divert attention from themselves. Soon, Mia learned another chilling detail. Several students connected to Lindsay had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind only fragmented traces. Rumors of mysterious disappearances began circulating on campus, and every time Mia tried to find out more, she felt as if she were being watched. One day, she set out for the place where Lindsay had died to gather more evidence, but as she entered the dark corridor, she suddenly heard a rustle behind her. Her heart raced, but she decided not to stop. Suddenly, a hand roughly covered her mouth, and a voice whispered, "You know too much, Mia." She felt strong hands gripping her, and for a moment, the world went dark. When she came to, she was lying on the cold floor of that same corridor, next to a sinister message scrawled directly on the wall. "If you don't stop, you'll meet her fate." Mia was relentlessly piecing together the scattered details of the case, feeling something slip just out of her grasp. The police seemed to be rushing to conclusions, overlooking the small things. It felt strange, as if the investigation was intentionally trying to hide certain details. After a long moment of contemplation, she decided to take a look inside Lindsay's room, hoping for at least a hint of something. The thought scared her, but with each step, her determination and anxiety grew. Lindsay's room stood empty, but the air felt cold, as if it were a place steeped in hushed silence. Everything was left almost exactly as it was the day Lindsay last closed the door. Nothing seemed suspicious. Textbooks, notes, even cosmetics were neatly arranged. Yet Mia's intuition told her there must be something more. Cautiously, she began checking the shelves, searching for anything the police might have missed or overlooked. In the corner under the bed, she felt something hard. As she pulled it out, a worn diary emerged from the dust. The cover was crumpled, as if it had been handled often, but the fact that it was left here in such an obvious spot made Mia uneasy. Why hadn't the police found it? Or perhaps they didn't want to. Trying to suppress her wave of anxiety, Mia opened the first page. The lines were uneven and emotional, conveying the depth of fear Lindsay had been harboring. At first, the entries were jumbled, but as she read on, a picture emerged of Lindsay consumed by terror and a paranoid sense that someone was constantly watching her. The entries detailed her anxiety about an unknown person at the university who seemed to know her every move. Mia felt her heart constrict as she read, "I can't escape him. He knows where I am at all times. If I try to do anything, he won't let me live." There was a chilling inevitability in those words. The further Mia read, the more frightened she became. One of Lindsay's final confessions hit her like a punch. "He made me submit. I couldn't tell anyone. And now I'm pregnant. But that will only make things worse. I have no one to trust." The shock of what she read literally took her breath away. There had been no mention of Lindsay's pregnancy in the official reports. How was that possible? Wouldn't such a fact have shown up in an examination? Or could the police have deliberately overlooked this to hide something bigger? The entries became increasingly desperate, as if Lindsay sensed her time was running out. She wrote about her growing fear, about how she no longer trusted anyone around her. "I tried to seek help, but all the gazes turned away, as if they had been ordered to stay silent. I'm scared. This is just the beginning." At that moment, Mia realized that Lindsay was involved in something much deeper than mere student scams. She knew too much, and someone inside the university was not only controlling these schemes but was also pulling people's strings like puppets. Lindsay had fallen into a trap from which she could not escape, and the realization of this drained Mia, leaving her with only one choice: silence. A cold horror washed over Mia. Her mind was swirling with even more questions than before. Who was this influential stranger manipulating everyone around them? What exactly was the police trying to hide? And were there other students who had suffered like Lindsay from this secret network? She felt as if the room had dimmed, as if the shadow of that person stretched even here, haunting her every step. Mia was trying to figure out everything about the people with whom Lindsay had conflicts or at least some connections. One potential witness, a senior named Jared Collins, had once been close to Lindsay. They had worked on several projects together and often saw each other at university events. After Lindsay began to withdraw from others and feel afraid, she completely cut off all communication with Jared. However, Mia suspected he might be someone who knew more about her final days. Finding Jared wasn't easy. He had become a recluse and hardly contacted anyone. Mia learned that Jared had left the dorm and moved to a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. His friends told her that since he started having problems with Lindsay and some suspicious individuals, he had become anxious, often lashing out at friends and not responding to any messages. After several days of searching, Mia finally got a response to her message. Jared agreed to meet, but chose a secluded spot, an old abandoned park near the university. He sent a brief message: "Come alone. Don't be late." The park was empty and gloomy. When Mia arrived, Jared stood in the shadows, almost invisible. His appearance unsettled her. He looked exhausted, with deep circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept for several days. Jared began to speak. He knew that Lindsay was afraid of someone from the university, someone very powerful. He suspected that the university administration had long been aware of the secret schemes operating within the institution but had turned a blind eye to it all. Lindsay had seemingly stumbled upon some abuse, that certain professors were receiving bribes for grade increases, that students were being used as cover for fraudulent schemes, and that Lindsay was trying to stop them. Jared recounted that before her death, Lindsay had sent him a message with a short text: "I've been found out. They'll do it." Jared also mentioned that he found a letter in his room with threats demanding silence. "These people don't joke around. I've seen what happens to those who try to speak out." This isn't the first time someone has suddenly disappeared from the university. But at the last moment, he hesitated, as if frightened by his own words. "You need to be careful, Mia. They won't back off if they find out you're getting close to the truth." As soon as I tried to find out the truth about Lindsay's death, I started feeling pressure, and I saw people who were watching me, even at night. I'm sure they warned the administration, and now they want to make sure I won't be a dangerous witness. But I don't know how long I can stay silent. The next morning, Mia learned that Jared had been found dead in his apartment. The police quickly classified it as a suicide since there were no signs of struggle at the scene, and a bottle of sleeping pills lay nearby. But something about it didn't sit right with Mia. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was a staged setup. After all, just yesterday, he had poured out all the fear and despair he had been holding inside, and she knew he wasn't ready to give up. Mia felt as though she was being watched. Her phone repeatedly showed strange messages about failed hacking attempts, and several times, she noticed suspicious figures following her on the street. She was on edge but decided not to back down. She needed to gather as much evidence as possible before the situation became even more dangerous. A few days later, she was summoned to the university administration. When she walked into the office, 3 people sat at the table: the president, the dean of the faculty, and a legal representative. All 3 were looking at her with cold glares, and the room was filled with tense silence. "Mia," the president began, seemingly friendly, but a metallic glint was visible in his eyes. "We've heard that you're conducting, shall we say, an unwanted investigation. You need to understand that this could lead to serious consequences not just for you, but for the entire university. These consequences," the dean interjected, "could turn into more than just academic punishment for you. If you don't stop meddling in what doesn't concern you, we can find grounds for your expulsion, and information about your antics could ruin your future career." Mia felt her throat tighten, but the president continued, stepping closer and lowering his voice. "Not just your career is at risk. Sometimes young people who dig too deep encounter unfortunate accidents. You saw what happened to Jared. It's terrible, isn't it? Such a young and promising guy. And he just broke down like that. You wouldn't want your parents to get such a call one day, would you?" Mia felt her hands grow cold. She realized she was not just facing the university administration. She was confronting the very people Lindsay had feared. They were not only aware of all the schemes but actively supported them. This was a group of influential individuals who were protecting their interests, unafraid to eliminate anyone who became a threat. Mia was released from the office with a final warning, but now she knew for certain that she was on the edge. Mia Reilly, after all the trials and pressure, finally found what she had been searching for. Her investigation led her to Harry Cross, the chancellor whose esteemed reputation masked a dark underbelly. She knew that Lindsay hadn't just vanished without a trace. She was directly connected to this man. Mia sat in a dark office, listening to the heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. Her heart raced in sync with her anxious thoughts. She was on the brink, and what she had uncovered consumed her from within. The investigation had revealed dangerous connections between Lindsay's disappearance and corruption within the university. Each new fact only heightened her fear, for she knew she had stumbled into a web of darkness that she couldn't handle alone. When Harry Cross stepped into the room, the air became thick with tension. He regarded Mia with eyes glimmering with hatred, like a beast ready to pounce. She realized she was in a perilous situation, but now, as he stood before her with a knife in hand, all her fears had become reality. "You shouldn't have dug into what's not your business." His voice slithered, low and menacing. "Uncovering the truth about Lindsay? Honey, you have no idea what you're dealing with." Mia felt a chill creep down her spine as she held her breath. "I know you killed her. You used your connections to cover it all up. And now I know everything." Harry sneered, but there was nothing human in his smile. "Lindsay was a threat, and you might be next if you don't shut up." He raised the knife, his face a mask of cruelty twisted into a desire to kill. Mia lunged for the door, but the chancellor blocked her, gripping her wrist. She felt cold sweat bead on her forehead. Desperately, she tried to break free from his grasp, but he was stronger. Her fingers pressed the panic button, and a deafening alarm blared through the room. Harry reacted with panic, but instead of letting her go, he became even more aggressive. He grabbed a heavy object from the desk. It was an old metal statuette. "You think you can close this case? No, you're going to become part of my story," he shouted, swinging it at her. Mia tried to back away, but she was too late. The heavy statuette struck her head with a dull thud. The world spun and she lost consciousness. In the moment she fell to the floor, everything around her began to blur into a haze. When Mia regained consciousness, she lay on the floor, blood pooling around her. Her own blood, flowing from the wound on her head, formed a small puddle, encircling her like a red sea. In her ears, the distant sound of sirens echoed, but they felt so far away, as if she were in another reality. In her last moments of consciousness, as awareness began to resurface, an image of Lindsay flashed before her eyes, the girl who had been destroyed for the truth. And now, the dark side of corruption and violence had risen against her. It all pointed to one thing. She was not alone. There were many, and they needed protection. The police apprehended him, and he began to struggle desperately. At the trial, Harry Cross faced charges of assault and murder in Lindsay's case, manipulating students and faculty using his influence. Mia felt relief when Becky was cleared of all charges, but the bitterness of the brutal methods employed lingered in her heart. Subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments about what the next story should be. And remember, every mystery has its price.